Nobody ever pays attention to the quiet homeowner, not until the neighborhood bully with a clipboard decides to target the wrong property. My name is Mara Voss. I spend my days preparing easement documents. It's not exactly an exciting career. I drive an ordinary sedan, live quietly, and keep to myself. No one on the Hollow Pines HOA board had the slightest idea that the road running straight through their subdivision, the same road every resident used each day, was legally tied to my family's name. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Everything began over a flower bed. Denise Kowalski, the self-appointed ruler of the Hollow Pines HOA, rolled up in her spotless white Yukon with her ever-present clipboard tucked beneath her arm. "Ma'am, your hydrangeas are extending into the roadway right-of-way. Under Section 4.2 of the Community Covenants, any landscaping within 10 feet of the road requires prior approval from the board." I smiled politely. "Denise, that isn't your right-of-way. That's my road." She actually laughed. A full dismissive laugh. "That's adorable," she said. "I'll just document the violation." She scribbled another note across her clipboard. She was always writing something on that clipboard. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived in my mailbox. A $50 fine. Reason: unauthorized landscaping obstruction. Private roadway pursuant to HOA bylaw, Section 4.2. Private roadway. There was that phrase again, as if repeating it often enough would somehow make it legally accurate. I didn't argue. I simply paid the $50. $50 meant nothing compared to the information I already had. Information the HOA didn't. That road had never belonged to Hollow Pines. It was a recorded private easement my grandfather granted to the original developer back in 1978. The easement was revocable and had remained in my family's name for 46 years. The HOA didn't own the pavement beneath their own street signs. They were simply using it because my family allowed them to. I kept that to myself. I let Denise keep filling pages on her clipboard. 2 weeks later, the white Yukon returned. Denise climbed out, folded her arms, and hugged the clipboard against her chest. "We're restriping the road next month. You'll need to move your vehicles during the work schedule." "It's my road, Denise. According to Section 4.2, the HOA maintains every roadway inside." "No," I interrupted. "You don't maintain it. You never have." "I do." Her expression hardened. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have your vehicles towed." "You can certainly try." She stared at me for another moment before climbing back into the Yukon. She didn't argue. She simply wrote something else on her clipboard and drove away. Friday evening, I heard heavy equipment outside. Metal scraped against asphalt. When I looked through my front window, I saw 2 contractors wearing HOA branded safety vests installing heavy steel bollards directly across my driveway. Not just my driveway. They were placing them across the only entrance road leading into and out of Hollow Pines. There were no permits displayed, no advance notice, and certainly no authorization from me. By sunrise, 6 steel bollards stood perfectly aligned across the road. A thick chain stretched between them, secured with heavy padlocks. In the center hung a laminated sign attached with zip ties. "Road closed by order of the Shaw Board. Section 4.2. Denise's SUV sat idling at the end of the street. She watched from behind the windshield. Her clipboard rested on the dashboard. She believed she'd trapped one homeowner. What she'd really trapped was every one of the 140 families living beyond those barricades. Here's what nobody on the Hollow Pines board had ever taken the time to verify. The easement my grandfather signed in 1978 didn't simply grant access. It granted a revocable license allowing public and resident use of the roadway at the sole discretion of the easement holder. That easement holder was me. And revocable meant exactly what any property attorney would tell you it meant. The first call I made wasn't to the HOA. It wasn't even to their attorney. I called my own office. I drafted easement documents like this for clients all the time. This would be the first one I'd ever prepared for myself. "I need a formal notice of easement revocation," I told one of my colleagues. "Make it effective immediately." Reference the roadway obstruction as a material breach of the license agreement. The installation of permanent structures without the owner's consent voids their access rights under paragraph 6. By 10 o'clock that morning, the notice had been officially recorded with the county. By 11, copies were taped to every single bollard. Right at noon, Denise arrived. For once, there was no clipboard. Instead, she stood there recording everything with her phone. "You can't do this," she snapped. The moving truck sat there with its engine still running while the driver argued with dispatch over the phone. Before long, someone reported the blocked roadway to the county sheriff, describing it as a public safety emergency. When deputies arrived, their report identified the HOA, not me, as the party responsible for creating the obstruction. That made perfect sense. I hadn't placed a single bollard in the ground. All I had done was exercise a legal property right that had been recorded in county records for decades, plain as day, in black and white. Around 3 that afternoon, a local television news crew pulled into Hollow Pines. With cameras rolling, Denise stood on the edge of her front lawn trying to defend herself one last time. This is a private roadway maintained by the Hollow Pines Homeowners Association under Section 4.2 of our governing documents. Before she could continue, the reporter interrupted. Ma'am, county land records show this roadway is actually a private family easement, not property owned by the HOA. Were you aware of that? Denise didn't answer. She simply stared at the camera. That interview aired during the evening news. To this day, people still share the clip online. Then someone else finally broke their silence. The HOA treasurer, a quiet man named Phil, who had spent the last 3 years sitting through board meetings without saying much of anything, sent me an email. Attached were internal board messages. Those emails revealed something even more damaging. Denise had known about my family's easement for well over a year. A previous board member had discovered the filing, warned everyone about it, and urged the board to address the issue properly. Instead of listening, they voted that board member out, accusing him of creating unnecessary problems for the association. Denise buried the information. She moved ahead with installing the bollards anyway, convinced I'd react the same way everyone else had before me. She expected me to give in. I didn't. I forwarded every email, every internal message, and every document to both the county officials and the television station. Within a week, the steel bollards disappeared. The county ordered the HOA to remove every one of them, and the entire expense came directly out of the association's budget. 2 days after the news report aired, Denise resigned as HOA president. 2 additional board members stepped down shortly afterward. The association was fined for installing unpermitted structures and for blocking the only access road, leaving residents stranded for nearly 6 hours. Within a month, homeowners elected an entirely new board. Their very first agenda item wasn't another violation notice. It was meeting with me to properly record a new easement agreement. This time, everything was done correctly. The document clearly outlined maintenance obligations, access rights, and legal responsibilities. Most importantly, it included my signature. There were no courtroom battles, no drawn-out legal war. Just paperwork completed the way it should have been from the beginning. The entire dispute ended almost as quickly as it had exploded. That Sunday morning, I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee and watched traffic move through the neighborhood again. Everything looked normal. Cars rolled by at their usual pace. There were no steel bollards, no laminated warning signs, no white Yukon parked nearby, and no clipboard. I didn't feel victorious. Mostly, I felt exhausted. It's the kind of tired that settles in after something completely unnecessary finally comes to an end. Denise wasn't some larger-than-life movie villain. She was simply someone who owned a laminator, had far too much free time, and believed paperwork gave her authority she had never bothered to verify. As I sat there, a little boy from 2 houses down knelt on the sidewalk with a piece of chalk. He drew a crooked map of the neighborhood. There were driveways, mailboxes, a goofy stick-figure dog, and one long road connecting every house. To him, it wasn't my road or the HOA's road. It was simply everyone's street. He had never spent a single second worrying about who technically owned it. Looking at that drawing, I realized that was the real ending to the story, not the television interview, not the county order, not Denise's resignation, just a child's chalk drawing reminding everyone what the neighborhood was supposed to be. So now I have a question for you. If you discovered tomorrow that a rule someone had used to intimidate you for years was never actually legitimate, what would you do? Would you challenge it immediately, the way I probably should have from the very beginning? Or would you ignore it like I did until someone finally pushed things too far? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one.